This is Still Here, Still Queer Now What, your companion through queer midlife. I'm Dr. Paul Taylor-Pitt. I'm the author of Still Here, Still Queer Now What, the book, coming everywhere 21st of October. Very special guest on the podcast today who I met by accident. I got into a lift and my guest was in the lift. And we just started chatting. I was wearing a t-shirt that he commented on and we got chatting over the course of like 3 floors of being in the lift together, and then just stood outside going, but just had this amazing conversation and connected. And we've bumped into each other loads of times since then. He very kindly wrote an endorsement for my book and even more kindly agreed to come on the podcast. He's an incredible person. I'm very excited for you to meet him because I felt like I met him properly for the first time on the podcast. All of the conversations that we've had have been kind of fleeting moments where we see each other at events. And it was great to actually sit down with him for an hour and hear about his life. He's achieved amazing things. Joseph Galliano was the founder of Queer Britain Museum. He's been the editor of Gay Times. He's been a journalist. All of the things that you're going to hear him talking about. And we just had the most lovely conversation. It's very relaxed. It's very free flowing. And I'm very, very grateful both to know him and to be able to introduce you to him, maybe in a way that you haven't met him before. So sit back and relax. As always, I asked my guest, how would they like people to meet them today? If someone hasn't come across you before and they were to meet you right now, who are they meeting?
I think probably the number one thing would be the founder of the UK's LGBTQ plus museum. But I'm also a former editor of Gay Times magazine. I've been a major donor fundraiser. I've been a celebrity ambassador specialist for charities. I've been editor of a series of books where I get celebrities to write a letter to their 16-year-old selves. Basically, though, everything's always really had a sort of a social impact purpose. And on top of that, I'm a husband, I'm a bad musician, I'm a rubbish drawer, and just like to have a bit of fun and a bit of creativity in my life as well.
So already I've got like 15 questions. So I definitely want to come back to the celebrity ambassador, but let's start with Queer Britain because I was there at the weekend. I was hosting an event with my friend Layla, who's written an amazing book, and she asked me to host it, which was lovely. And it felt like home. It felt like our space. It felt like I had a moment where I thought, even though I'm just going to be in this space for like 90 minutes, I'm now part of the story of this place. It felt incredibly moving and profound to be doing that. Was that what you expected when you decided to come up with the idea?
There was so much I hadn't expected because I had in front of me the idea of why we needed a museum and how we were going to do that. What I hadn't really properly calculated was the emotional impact it would have on myself, on the team, and on our community. The other thing that I think was really important, and it's you're talking there about home and about stories, and what I felt was really important was that we created a museum that was an LGBTQ plus museum, a queer museum, but it was for everyone. So it wasn't just for us. Wouldn't normally encounter our stories, but it was a space where we were telling our stories for everyone. So it was a place where we were in control of the narrative. And in that sense, I wanted it to feel like a home and I wanted it to feel welcoming. So for example, we called the team that would, the front of house team, we called the welcome team specifically because we wanted to make sure that people felt welcomed into the space.
Yeah, I'm just thinking I don't know, I'm an only child, center of the universe. I didn't realize it was for straight people as well. And of course, now you say that, it makes so much sense. Of course it is. Of course it is.
Well, if we're just talking to ourselves, why are we bothering?
It's nice though sometimes.
It's nice sometimes to talk to ourselves, but it depends it depends what the reason the space exists. If it's about taking control of our own narratives.
Do you remember where you were when you first had the idea for it?
Well, actually. There's two moments. There's the very, very deep history moment, which is in 2007 when it was the 40th anniversary of the partial decriminalisation of gay male sex. I was thinking, I was editor of Gay Times magazine, and I was thinking, what kind of generation gap has grown up between younger I mean, we were specifically talking about gay men at that point, but we were younger gay men and older gay men. And so what we did is I pulled together a round table with four people who hadn't yet been born in 1967 and four who were already adults in 1967, just,
Wow.
just to find out what they knew about each other's lives and bugger all is what they. And two of the younger people didn't know that it had ever been illegal for them to love whoever. And the older guys, they took it as a bit of a slap on the face because, they'd lived on the barricades. And so to be confronted by some younger people going, "Oh, I didn't know that." They took
Mm.
insult initially. We reframed that as how are they supposed to know what to ask if they don't know what to ask, and if we're not teaching them in the schools and museums, and I think that was the very germ of an idea where it was like there needs to be a space that sort of chaperones these narratives, and that really I would say was the very root of it. But the actual moment was I went to see the Queer British Art exhibition in Tate Britain, and this would have been 2017, late 2017, I think. And I was standing in front of the cell door from Oscar Wilde's prison cell from Reading Jail, and I was kind of sort of meditating in front of this very profound, ugly, important object. And I could hear the conversations happening around me. And there was the couple who were talking next to me were saying, "God, it's so unfair. Like, why haven't we got a museum like this? Why have we got to come here? Why haven't we got our own museum?" And it was a sentiment I'd heard before. And I kind of just snapped. I was like, "Right, I'll do it then." Stop moaning. No, just stop moaning that you want a thing, and let's make a thing happen. And so I think in that moment, I really sort of decided that I was going to take charge of trying to make that happen. That was,
I wonder if they would ever know that. I
No, I
wonder if
can't
they
admit it. I'd love to know. Like,
that couple having that conversation that then sparked action,
I've never
or at
thought.
least set the action on fire, because it was obviously there already. But that moment where you're just like, "Oh, fuck's sake, I'll just bloody do it."
And that was it. But that was the thing is you summed it up so perfectly. It really was. It was like a moment where the elastic band snapped. I was like, right,
Mm.
stop moaning.
In the time that you were at Gay Times,
Yeah.
what were you noticing about the shifts that were happening from the time that you joined to the time that you left? Like, is there like a window that you now characterize as, "Oh yeah, that's where we were and that's where we got to"?
Yeah, I mean, I know that it was it was a bit of a golden era, really. I mean, there was a sense that everything had moved so definitively in our community's direction. We were working on marriage equality was still big, particularly in the States, where it was the first in signs of the impending culture wars, I think, were coming. And there was a sense of the magazine trying to understand, and actually the sector trying to understand, like, what is its role in this
Hmm.
world where the the liberation of the 60s and the 70s had seemingly come into fruition, particularly once we'd got through the HIV medication wall as well. So it felt really like like the world is so full of possibilities, and how do we keep ourselves relevant? So there was a focus on the international movement, what needed to be done there. But there was also, I mean, I had a particular focus where I felt like the magazine had been kind of a bit depressed, and I thought it needed some joy injected into it.
Hmm.
And I also thought it needed some. We talked a lot about family, and we tried to talk a lot about like what our position in family is, and started to think about that, but trying to think about it from a position that wasn't just straightforwardly anxious, but that recognised that we all had different types of family backgrounds, and actually some of those were quite supportive. So that's my mind swimming all over the place of the answer to that question.
Well, it's funny because as you were talking, I was thinking about like a family metaphor. Like I always thought of Gay Times as like the wise uncle,
Huh.
quite serious, but important and had something to say and had a memory. And
Yeah,
then there was attitude, which was like your wild cousin who's just off their face all the time.
yeah,
And
yeah.
both are welcome at the family gatherings. But Gay Times to me at that point, I guess, had a bit more seriousness. And so I didn't realize that sense of injecting some joy into it was very deliberate. Because
Sorry, go on. Go on.
Well, yeah, I guess I just saw it as, okay, I'm going to sit down and read Gay Times. I need to put my serious head on. But also being very grateful for that, like appreciating that there is something here that isn't just the kind of frivolity of like Heat magazine or, Smash Hits or whatever it was that I kind of was reading when I was younger.
Smash Hits. Oh God, Smash Hits, so great. I think one of the things about it was that because it was the heritage title, because it was the nearest thing that we had to it. This is the title of record, so that was important. But also though it needed to expand its viewpoint. I think in order to not just be dowdy and not kind of dowdy and angry.
2 words on my Grinder profile.
Pick it up if it's dowdy and angry. I mean, what I thought was really interesting was that there was a movement at that period. In fact, that underneath my editorship and also Matt Todd under Attitude's leadership, and we had a little bit of a movement towards each other's titles, really, where Attitude, certainly under Matt, was a lot more concerned with things like the environment and politics in a way that they never had been before, because it had all been fashion and celebs, and Gay Times tried to get a bit of sparkle to it as well. So
I mean, it's two things. It's only two things that we've talked about so far, but they're both two things which are totemic, is the word which comes to me. Like, there are two things which are part of queer history that you've stewarded for a period of time and left them in better places. When I think if I had my hands on those kind of jewels of our community, I don't think I'd ever want to let go. What is it about you that's able to go, actually, I've done what I needed to do here. Now I need to move on to the next thing?
is it a dopamine problem?
Well, for me, it's a superpower that you can not outstay your welcome.
Well, I think there was a sorry, I've got a fly has decided to want to spill my tea. I think there's an interesting thing of like I really like that. Really like getting things up and running, and I really enjoy the kind of well, I can't think of the word. What's the word? I'm full of adrenaline. Adrenaline. So
Yeah.
I like the adrenaline of those things. And I remember when I first started the museum project. I remember talking to my mentor Emma, and I remember saying to her, "Look, I've got the idea for this project. It's setting up a museum. I have worked for people who have founders syndrome before, and I can see how damaging and toxic that can be.
Hmm.
And I am determined that I'm not going to be that person. So I want to start this project with a sense of what my exit plan is when the right moment for me to hand off. So I was basically building the museum in order to find it, to get it to a space where I could hand it to someone else. And I think I was aware that I didn't want to kind of throw all of that work into it and community hope and my own personal hope and then become the thing that becomes a barrier to its success.
And even in the way that you described talking to Emma, like for me, when I start piecing together, because, we've met each other several times. I've always loved spending time with you. I never feel like we've had enough, like we're always seeing each other at things.
It's
And I
funny.
never feel like I've got enough space to sit and really listen.
And yet you're always the person I want to kind of go, oh, let's go on. Oh,
Well, likewise, I'm the same. And I'm like, I want more time. But even just building up this picture now of, what we've been talking about for 20 minutes, the fact that you had a mentor to me is something where I would go, okay, that's different. The fact that you were aware of wanting to start something with a view to an exit, I go, oh, that's different. So how did you get to those places where you had the humility and the humanity to be able to know that this wasn't a vanity project? This was something that you were still seeking mentorship about. This was something you knew you were going to hand over. Like, what happened in the years leading up to that made you that person?
oh, what an interesting question and what a difficult one to answer. So I had worked with, so I was specifically exposed really to mentorship. I think probably first when I worked for, I was deputy CEO for an organization called Outstanding, which organized some of those lists of emerging top
Yes, yeah,
100 business leaders. And we did it in
yeah.
partnership with the Financial Times. And one of the things that we put there, one of the things that was big in that space was mentoring programs. And we developed a mentoring program. Well, I developed a mentoring program to have senior executives mentoring new entrants, workers, and mid career people. vice versa. And it gave me an opportunity really to think a lot about the value of mentorship. There is that sense of you're never enough of a team by yourself, and we all need some cheerleaders, and we all need people that we can have a jeopardy-free space to chew over the issues of the day, our approaches, like what's not to do with, we're not working with that person. We're able to talk confidentially in a way that we can explore ideas and we can make a total ass of ourselves with the ideas we explore. It'll give us a sense as to how to behave. And so actually one of the things I did was in setting up this mentoring scheme, and with one eye on the idea that I wanted a mentor, I approached the person who I most wanted to be a mentor to deliver the keynote speech so that I could have some time with her. And then, so I find that reassuring. I find that really reassuring, to feel like you've got a team behind you.
Who were your mentors as you were discovering who you were as a younger queer person?
It's funny because I go through life and I like, people are mentors even when they don't know they're mentors. Including awful people as well, who you can set yourself in opposition against, which I always think is an interesting thing to do. I've had so many through my life. I mean, are you talking about like very young? Are you talking? When are you talking about here, really?
I guess when I think about myself, I remember, so growing up in Aberdeen, where I thought I was the only gay person, and then they opened a Debenhams. It was a big deal. Like nothing like Debenhams had ever come to Aberdeen before. And so the local newspaper was doing like a spotlight on Debenhams and interviewing staff. And they did an interview with this guy who, if I remember rightly, his name was David, and he worked on the perfume counter. And they described him as an unabashed homosexual.
Unabashed?
Unabashed. And I remember thinking, well, does that mean they're just waiting for it to happen? But, I think they were trying to pay him a compliment. And I remember I used to take myself into town at the weekend and just stand in Debenhams looking at him. He probably thought, who the fuck is that creepy kid again? But I just remember thinking, oh, it's not just me. And so he would never know that I saw him as a mentor, but I saw him as someone who was unabashed, he had survived. And he was cool enough that the newspaper would do an interview with him. And that gave me a bit of hope, even though I never spoke to him, because I would have been mortified if I'd spoken to him. I couldn't have done it. But I used to just walk past and be like, oh, there he is, still here.
And that's so lovely. I mean, I think my earlier ones would have been, I think prior to going to college, prior to going to Polytechnic, as it was then. I know. I was like,
I love Polytechnic.
a reverse snob. I was a reverse snob about it. I was offended when my degree came through as from university. I was like, I went to a Polytechnic. In those early days, I think probably it was more like a sort of cultural thing. So it was more of a sort of the music that I'd kind of went into. And I was a huge fan of Tom Robinson, who had written "Glad to Be Gay," 2468 Motorway, and War Baby. I was huge fan of his. And through his music and his kind of political standpoints and his sense that actually it was okay to be angry about being treated as a set of communities rather than embarrassed about who we were or any of those kind of things. And so that I would say his really became the cradle that I developed my own sense of self. And I was lucky enough years later it was about 25 years ago, to actually meet, and we've been tight friends ever since, and that's been one of the most satisfying relationships. So like, for example, his mentorship is so interesting, because before we met, he was mentoring through his music, and then when we met and we became friends, he sort of stayed really to this day as somebody that I turn to for advice and support. And like, for example, when I decided to become a journalist when I was about 30, he gave me a silver Parker pen as a sort of like piece of encouragement. And he'd always try and kind of give me little bits of work that he could, and just trying to keep me going through reinvention periods. And I don't think there was anybody else that really engaged with it in that way, that made me feel like I was like, not only was I on the right path, but I was being encouraged.
How did you get to be cool at that young age? Like, when I think about that time for me.
Cool.
I was listening to Belinda Carlisle and Debbie Gibson. You know, I wouldn't have known who Tom Robinson was. That to me would have just been like, oh no, that's what cool people do. Like,
Well,
were you quite a thinky kind of child?
I was quite a thinky. Yeah, I've always been a thinky child. I've always been a thinky child. I still am to this day. One of the things that really helped culturally was that my brother moved back home when I was 14 or 15. And he moved back home because he was saving up for his mortgage, and we ended up sharing a room for a little while. He's like 5 years older than me, and he'd been a late punk, and kind of, but also he didn't know whether he was going to be a punk or a hippie, and he well new way. But he brought this fantastic record collection, which suddenly appeared in my bedroom, and so I was suddenly exposed to like there was Tom's records were in there. There was like Talking Heads, there was Public Image Limited, and the Pistols, and Gong, and Hawkwind, and like all of this kind of bonkers music as well.
So you had an in-house tastemaker.
I had an in-house tastemaker.
See, I didn't have that. I just ran feral through the shelves of HMV and was like, oh, I'm going to listen to Tanita Ticker. You know, I was just like,
How did you choose? How did you choose? If you're
smash
flicking,
hits.
you're flicking through smash hits, great.
Probably a case of either do I like the music or do I fancy the singer? So I know that I would have chosen things like Aha just because of fancying Morton Harkett. Like I didn't care for their music, but it meant I could like, you know, have a poster on my wall because I was really into their music when really I was just really into him.
Well, the funny thing is that the STI clinic that I used to go for my checkups in, it used to be the one off of, it's probably still there, I don't know. Oh, it used to be off the Tottenham Court Road, and it was called the Mortimer Market Clinic. And we
Yes.
always used to amongst my friends and my boyfriends, we used to call it the Morton Harkett.
His legacy lives on forever.
You know,
Because I do,
swab by swab.
because I remember reading something, and maybe it was in the News of the World or something equally awful, about how he used to like pick up fans at his concert and then take them back to his room and read them the Bible. I don't know why I remember that, but that, you know, that was like, okay, maybe he's not the man for me.
But the cheekbone.
Oh, the cheekbones and that picture in Smash Hits of him coming out of the swimming pool in his Speedos, you know, that forever burned in my brain.
He's still my beating heart. I shall Google this immediately after we've finished.
It's like a blue color photo, like, yeah, life changing. How old are you now?
I'm 55 next birthday, 55 in
I
August.
love that you're kind of like counting.
Well, no, it's terrible. It's that age, isn't it, where you go, I am, how old am I?
Yeah, I work it out by counting from 1973 to 2000 and then adding the number of years because I still can't believe that it's not like it's 2000.
I count my rings.
What's it like being almost 55?
It's surprising because I don't know about you, but I don't feel any older, but I have seen the people around us get younger, which is it's really strange when it's that thing of like when you go into a bar, and it used to be that if you were going into like a gay bar, it used to be that, such as they still exist, the sound in my head when I was in my 20s would be, whereas now the sound in my voice is, so it's the movement from the floor to the arm.
And then standing up and going, oof, because everything hurts.
Yeah, after the oof, yeah.
Where were you going out at that stage? Like, where would I have seen you?
In Soho, it would have been pretty limited, but it was limited back then as well because there wasn't that many. But it would have been Compton's. It would have been Brief Encounter, which was on the Channel. Do you remember Brief Encounter?
Yes, yeah.
You'd see guys in their motorbike leathers and their motorbike helmets walking around all evening, cruising around all evening. And then you'd see those same people on the night bus on the way home with their motorbike helmet and then that, right?
I mean, there were some amazing places.
As well, the Yard. So it's those kind of like Soho places.
I had my 21st birthday in the Yard. Yes, I had my 18th birthday in Heaven.
They seemed so glamorous in the early days.
So glamorous. It was like, it was almost like the equivalent of EastEnders getting a wine bar.
Yeah, it was like the Village felt glamorous.
Yes, anything that didn't have blacked out windows.
It was amazing. Yeah, amazing. Because actually, yes, you're right. Because I can remember that in the very early first places I've gone to, when they still had people would still open their little window and they'd look at you through
like Jabba the Hutt's palace. I remember going to the Coleherne in Earl's Court, and it was like, oh, it's closed, and you go, oh no, it's just the windows are all covered in like black paint. It's wild.
Funny. The Coleherne is funny though because there's a live Tom Robinson album called Glad to Be Gay Cabaret '79, which is a live cabaret show in 1979, and somebody comes into the auditorium late and he stops what he's doing he stops the song that he's about to start and he says, "Oh, refugees from the Colne." I can only presume that some leathery queen's going, okay.
I mean, the whole thing back then for me was just terrifying. Like, I landed from Aberdeen. I was, still 17, but almost 18. And what a different world. And yet now I feel very grateful that I got to experience some of that different world, and survive it. That
How many times did you have to walk past the bar before you went in? Were you
sometimes it was quite a soft landing because I was misled in my university prospectus. I went to Brunel University that called itself Brunel University London, but it was Uxbridge. It
Yeah.
was not London. I did not have a London phone number. I had an 01895 number. And so I felt really cheated. But in a way, it was a very safe landing because I joined, at the time, it was Gay Soc. And then we expanded into lesbian and gay society, it was that kind of time. And so they used to organize events and trips. And so we were kind of shepherded. And so I always felt really safe because there would be a little cluster of us. Although I do remember the first time going to heaven, the rumor going through the group, you have to prove that you're gay to get in. And everyone going, what are they going to do? Fuck us. It's like, what? It was the
We've got
weirdest
a
thing. But
bumming policy, right?
yes, exactly. But I always felt very kind of safe and protected in that respect. It wasn't until I was a bit older that I would go out to places on my own, at which point I was okay with it. So I didn't, but then actually I went to a place in Aberdeen, but again, that was going with friends. That was like you know, telling my parents I was going round a friend's house and then we would get in someone's Fiesta and go off to Crazy Daisies. It was just like
That Crazy Daisy, what was Crazy Daisy like?
awful, awful. But again, it was that thing of, oh, wow, there's other people here like me. I remember going home and I must have been up all night because I was making a mixtape of all the songs I'd heard so that I would remember that night because it was like, it was like Wizard of Oz moment of going, oh my God, I've gone from black and white to color. And, making my tape of Erasure and Belinda Carlisle and going.
It's funny because I didn't do the music thing because the thing that I always found was sort of lacking for me was the music because my music taste was so not aligned with what I was hearing. So when I'd go to clubs, it was always for the sort of the social slash sexual.
And were you successful? Because I mean, I might as well have been either invisible or like with massive glowing neon that said, avoid me. Like I felt
Hit
like
and miss.
I did not fit in.
No, hit and miss because I was gauche and very lacking in self-confidence and, that excruciating self-consciousness that comes over us and prevents us from doing all the stuff that we should be doing if we could only just get out of our way. And yeah, let's say there were enough open windows to let me air the house.
Yeah, we'll go with that. I was gonna say jump through, but equally that's not a great thing.
But but I think it was one of those things where I was always left feeling like I wish I'd done more, and I wish I'd been more confident. I wish I'd just been bold. I wish I'd just. So you kind of get haunted, or I found that I was like haunted by the times that I didn't
Mm.
have the nerve to talk to someone, or and there's still a few that I still play over in my head and go, "Hmm, oh, that person that I saw once, met once,
Well,
saw it."
but then I remember those days and being quite kind of sad about it, like reading in the pink paper. There would be those personal ads that people would put in, like, were you on the Piccadilly line last Saturday wearing a blue jacket? I smiled at you. That was our equivalent of Grindr. It was like, I'll wait for 3 weeks to get a response for someone to say, no, I didn't notice. But
Yeah,
just
I'm not
that
sure
feeling
if
of
you
like,
actually met their partner through one of those who've been together for
no.
30 odd years, 40 years, yeah.
I mean, I love that you firstly know what I'm talking about because a lot of people don't. And secondly, that worked for someone.
I know, right, I know. Well, the thing is, I remember as well, before I moved to London, when I was still and again, I moved to London when I was 17, so I was, I think it's fair to say a suburban boy, pretty wet behind the ears.
Had you
Uh,
come out at that point to
I'd
anyone other than yourself?
Yeah, I had done. I had done. I had like a couple of friends, and I'd told my parents, but then I'd also withdrawn the statement almost immediately because I suddenly realised I needed to live in the house with them for a couple of years. And I had a
So
couple of.
did you say you were mistaken or just saw their
I
response?
think I said, "Now I've said it. Now I've said it. I don't think it's true."
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That old chestnut.
Yeah.
And the funny thing was is that my mum and stepdad, they had the most hilarious response was that they sent me on a National Trust working holiday because they thought plenty of fresh air and hard work and you'll meet some girls. That'll sort you out. A National
Yeah.
Trust working holiday, like a weekend of cutting
Mm.
down thistles was going to help. And the ironic thing was that I met a lad there who, although nothing ever happened with him, who I got so moon-eyed about that it
Yeah.
completely confirmed to me that it was like, "No, I definitely am gay," and Brian was so supportive.
Every time I pick a thistle, I think of him.
Yeah, do you know, it's so funny because I can remember there was one moment, and it's a powerful memory of, we were clearing thistles, and there was one moment where I glanced across the field at him, and he was standing there just in a pair of shorts with a scythe, and I just remember thinking, "That's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life," and I remember very, very consciously drinking in every detail because I knew that this was an image I didn't wanna lose, and to this day, I can conjure that image up.
And it's a hot image, it's not like he was, like, lying on the ground, weeping. It's like it sounds like he was
That's
in
where
a
you were going there.
he
Lying on the
sounds
ground.
like he was in an Athena poster with his scythe
It
and
was
his
like that, and that was very much the sign of the times, wasn't it? Imagery of the times that was so popular, that kind of I think it was the Herb Ritts one, isn't it? The guy holding the top. It's ridiculous. This ridiculous hyper masculinity that's weirdly camp and feminized.
Yes.
It's a
And
very
what's
interesting space.
what's more camp than cutting thistles with a scythe? I mean, that just feels like it needs to be recreated. It needs to be in Queer Britain.
Yeah.
You
I
should pose for it.
got it here. It's funny, I carried around a photograph and an address. He'd written he was in the UK because he was American forces staying in Cambridge. His father had been, and when everybody swapped their details to keep in touch, like no one's actually going to keep in touch, but I had this piece of paper where he'd written down how to get in touch with them, and I carried that in my wallet for 5 years
Yeah.
until I finally smuggled it into a diary, and then I put it behind another picture just because I didn't want anybody else to see. Like, it's odd, but deeply
It's
fascinating.
beautiful. I think that's the loveliest thing. I don't think it's odd at all. There's something so gorgeous about that time of, first crush, like first proper
The
crush.
intensity.
Yeah. And I would watch my classmates at school living it for real, and it was never available to me. One of my neighbors, we were still in late primary school, so we would have been like maybe just coming up for secondary school, so maybe 11. And he was having sex with his girlfriend. And I remember thinking, firstly, "Oh, I wish I was her." But also, "Oh, you get to do that."
Do you know, it's so funny because I was having this conversation the other day with a friend who is 23, and they were saying, it's so unfair, isn't it? Because it's like, we watch our straight counterparts and they're doing all of this kind of like playing at relationships and playing at adults. And he says, he was feeling like that had been taken from him.
Mm,
And it just made me think that it's like, there's a lot of the sort of the basic stuff where the experience looks on the surface like it's changed, but actually in reality, most people are still in that same kind of position.
yeah. I think there's a story that we tell ourselves, maybe a little bit of a kind of fairy tale about, oh, young people, they're all pansexual and they're all really cool and I think, well, it's nice to believe that. But if you're that young person living in the arse end of nowhere, are you really that person? Can you be yourself? And I don't know that we are there yet. And especially with all this stuff that's going on politically, like all of those conversations are being shut down again and people are being silenced again. I I don't know. I don't know that it's as rosy as I would like to
No, I
believe.
don't think it's as rosy. I think in a lot of ways it is, and but in a lot of ways, we are in. Well, we both know we're in perilous times at the moment. But I think it's also kind of we're at the point at which I optimistically tell myself that we're at a place where a generational change will sort out the last of this lingering nonsense. But it's also the other thing is that like every generation has a different set of concerns to the generation that came before. And so there is also that kind of generational tension, the generation gap, which is inevitable, which is why you get our generation, we were told by the generation before that it was like, oh, God, you're so politically correct. And you're so like, this generation, it's like, oh, bloody snowflakes, isn't it? It's like, wanting to, bloody snowflakes wanting to make sure everybody's included.
I know, with your pronouns.
But it's beautiful because it's like, when you think about what it is that are the concerns there, the concerns are that they want everybody to feel like they are a part of it, and that they're welcome, and that they're included, and that they're looked after, and that they're okay. And you know what, call it what you want. I think that's a pretty magnificent set of motivations. However clumsily handled, it's a beautiful set of motivations.
When I see people, particularly from the LGBT, well, actually, no, it's the LGBT community, and I think of them as very separate. When I see them ranting and raving about trans people and pronouns and inclusion, I don't think they are in any way edgy or interesting. I just think they sound old.
Reactionary. Yeah.
It's like, well, you've got old. What happened?
Thing is, though, is that that's not inevitable. The opposite can happen as well. Is that actually people let go of those things that aren't so important. The trouble is that LGB/T thing in particular is politically and algorithmically driven. And it's about status quo that isn't working anymore, shoring up its own defense by divide and rule. It's by the algorithmic nature of the media that we consume means that it's just as easy to make people angry as it is to make people click on your material because they're excited by it. So it's cheaper to make them angry. So if you are anxious about women's rights and then you have things presented to you so that they seem to clash with women's rights, then that's going to create cognitive dissonance that's also going to start creating more of a them and us problem. Is going to create dissonance in your classic liberal who is going to go, I want to support women, but I also want to support trans people. Oh, but I'm being told that this conflicts with that. And so people go, and everybody's shouting at me, I don't know what to do. And so they shut up. And what that means is that the people who have the most either reasons to be hurt or reasons to be scared or reasons to be angry are the ones whose voices get heard the most. And they get to define that set of boundaries. So they get to define the conversation. And it's not really it's not the reality of life on the ground, I think. But also, if we can be split off, then we lose our strength as a community, and our enemies don't really want us to be united. We're much easier to pick off if we're not looking out for each other.
So what are you doing with all this wisdom now?
I don't know about wisdom. Having these sorts of conversations, and do you mean in terms of work or in terms of like just generally what I'm doing? Or
just wondering, in the things that you've done, you've had this incredibly interesting history and career and life, and achieved these significant things, and then got to a point where you're like, okay, I know it's not about me, I know this is about community, I need to hand things on, and maybe that opened up a space. How are you filling that space?
Well, I'm still doing a series of work that has the kind of social and cultural impact that I enjoy. So I've been doing some work for the London Museum, doing some work for Bletchley Park. I've been supporting the Older Queer Voices podcast and organisation, which I'm a big fan of. Yeah, various things really. It's the funny thing is that it was like coming out of the other side of Queer Britain. It took me about a year to recover from how intense that journey and in all honesty, burnout as a result of that journey. And so it's only really this last kind of 6 months, I feel like I've been starting to kind of motor positively again. And I've also been doing, like in that time, I've been supporting a business support unit in one of the poorest wards in the richest borough in Kensington, Chelsea, with some fundraising work to help support underserved entrepreneurs. And what else? What else have I been doing? Well, I've started doing counselling training as well. So I was thinking in the long term, I'd quite like to take that kind of the community, what has shown up through my career as community concern and social impact. I'd actually like to bring back to a more sort of personal level, be a bit more kind of like, well, how does that translate on a one-to-one relationship rather than on a broadcast scale or institutional scale.
So and you used the term earlier, but there's something that I see in you about this ongoing like reinvention of yourself. This idea that you never just have to be one thing. You don't have to be stuck in one place. Where did that come from?
I think I think it's funny because it's happened about once a decade for the last 3 or 4 decades, and I think it comes from a real well of uncertainty. It comes from a refusal to pigeonhole myself as by work. It's like, I'm sorry, but I'm a Joseph shaped thing in the middle of this. And actually I'm interested in all sorts of things. And so what are the most interesting things in front of my feet at any one time? I think that's it really. It's like, what's the most interesting thing you can do at the time? And I've always been I've always been a profoundly big believer in probably it's an inability to work for my CV. Like I've just never been able to do that kind of sensible career path thing. And it's, like either it's a temperamental thing where, I get really offended by, I really get really offended by seeing like leaders in work environments who have got like big egos or not giving credit to their team, not shining a light on their team, self-serving, all of those kind of things. And when I've been in work environments and I've seen that happen within a leadership context, I probably get quite unmanageable. And whilst there's been times when it's felt like that's a problem, I'm actually quite proud of that as a thing. But that's where my values is rooted in that.
I think we are all better for it. I'm so glad you're unmanageable because if that's what's driven you to do what you've done, we're all better for it. A lot of the conversations I had with people for my book were around legacy. In the absence of traditional kind of family structures, what's our legacy? I don't know how you see it, but I could answer that question on your behalf very easily. If someone said, what's Joseph's legacy? Is that something you're conscious of?
No, it's. I mean, I think probably ego-wise, there's a little bit that would go like, I want that to work, but I'm more concerned with what's the most exciting, most meaningful thing we can do here and now. Legacy, it's for other people to unpick, isn't it? Really, if they should they so care to. But I'm interested in is it's interesting in a world where we can just be kind to each other and where there's an understanding of our frailties, my own included, where people are felt included and welcomed, where people are supported. It all sounds very sort of high-minded, but it's just nicer that way. I'd rather live in a world that was. I'm interested in kindness, reaching for something that you thought was unobtainable. Well, let's set up a museum. Okay. But I'm not thinking of it in terms of like, how will I be remembered after I've gone?
But the thing you describe as high-minded, to me, is actually quite a low bar. Like you're describing kindness, humanity, and when a low bar is something that's high-minded, to me, that's just an invitation to keep lifting it, keep making it higher so that we don't just have to accept that that's the world we live in. And I think that's something that you've done is just keep lifting that bar. Give us something to organize around, give us somewhere to meet, give us something to talk about, give us something to think about. Because to me, that's what keeps lifting the bar.
You've done that yourself. I mean, you've done that yourself with the book you've written, like taking that central thesis, isn't it? Of like, well, actually, how do we create a meaningful life now that we've got to our rather grand middle years, hopefully, But if you tie that as well in with the work, with your working as a counsellor and your work as
I've never trained as a counsellor. I've trained as a coach.
a coach.
But yeah, never been a counsellor. I thought about it. My degree was in psychology originally, but I remember halfway through thinking, oh, I could never be a psychologist.
Really? Why did you think that?
Yeah, I think I was too self-centered. I think I wouldn't have been interested in anyone else's issues because I had too many of my own. But it is something I look back at. Like, I don't think I have many regrets, if any, but I do think, I wonder what life would have been like if I'd pursued that. Because I do think that, the older I get, the more I see the value of just holding space for people, giving people time to think and offering that through a completely non-judgmental lens.
Yeah.
So, when I hear that you're in that space of training as a counsellor, it's like, thank fuck.
So, so what are you doing there is lifting people up, and it's exactly the same. It's exactly and making space for them. So it's exactly the same thing that you're accusing me of.
Guilty.
You're engendering yourself, which is great.
And we need more of it from everyone. But I'm grateful that you are someone that I can look to and someone that I can take that inspiration from, because it's really important. And something I ask everyone who comes on the podcast is to, if you were to come up with your version of the title of my book. So if I was to say to you, like, if you were to finish the sentence, I'm still here, I'm still queer, and what would you complete that with?
I need to lie down off the top of my head. No,
My
still
back.
queer. I'm still here, still queer. Let's go.
Nice. I love it. If you might not want to be found, but if you did want to be find, I can't even speak now.
I want to be
If you
fine.
did
I
want
want
to
to be
be
fine, and I
found,
want to be on a blacklist.
how might people find your work or access what you do?
Probably better. You can Google me.
Do you Google yourself?
Of course.
Yeah, I do
Anybody
all the
who says they
time.
don't is a bloody liar.
I've got an alert set up.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah. It's great. It
Brilliant.
doesn't ping as much as it used to, but
We'll get it pinging again.
probably LinkedIn, Joseph Galliano, probably the easiest thing. I don't really do the socials. I've got an Instagram page, but I don't use it. I find that I'm much happier not looking at social media.
Yeah.
Well, the world is nuts enough as it is.
Yeah. And yeah, how
What would
go on.
you? How would you, if you had to complete that book title in a different way? How would you do it?
Oh, wow. It'd probably be something like, I'm still here, I'm still queer, and I think I'm just getting started.
Yeah, great.
Like,
Yeah.
it does feel at this ripe old age. Like, I don't hanker for youth. I don't ever think, oh, I wish I was younger. I love being the age I am. And I love that I didn't know this back then. Like, I'd hate to be that person who's like, oh, I'd love to go back and be 20 and know this. I mean, I was annoying enough. I wouldn't want this as well. And I love that I feel like I'm still surprising myself and being surprised by people, because I would hate to ever get to a place where I go, oh yeah, I know how the world works.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm done. I'm then just waiting my time. So I feel like I am, yeah, just getting started, or constantly starting in different places.
I think that's a great place to be. It's a great place to be. It's funny. I think the other thing that always really struck me and has hit me many times through life, which is that when I've been in a period where you go, oh, I wish I was the kind of person who X, Y, Z. And then you realize, like, well, if I just start doing that thing, then I'll be the kind of person who would do that thing. So, and that was, like in my late 20s, picking up a guitar, going back to college and becoming a sound engineer and that was something that I'd spent years going, oh, I wish I was the type of person who did that. It's like, well, do it, then you'll be that person. Most recently, I've started teaching myself to draw with charcoals, and sort of like 4 months, just a hobby at home for myself, for my own pleasure. No jeopardy. The process is the fun thing. But that came after years of thinking, oh, I wish I could draw. And then it's like, well, do some drawing and then you'll draw.
Yeah, it's like get out of your own way.
But it seems so obvious, doesn't it? And yet that's all it is like, how do we, if we can realize quicker that life would be richer if we just did those things, then I think we'd all benefit from it.
Thank you. I needed to hear that, because now I'm thinking of all the things I've said to myself. I wish I did this. And actually, yeah, I could if I just did it
Dr. Taylor-Pitt, you're a vessel waiting to be filled.
repeatedly.
I think that's a whole other podcast though, isn't it?
Oh, we'll get you back and we'll start. That's where we'll pick up. I'm so glad that you had the space and time to do this and the willingness to do it. And I love that we've had probably the longest conversation we've ever had. And yet I'm still left wanting more. So thank you.
I'm sorry, I know you're trying to finish there rather. But I just like, one other thing that I wanted to just add about particularly about the museum, but also about the work of like the Older Queer Voices podcast. And one of the things that I found so valuable is that it's through that work and through the sort of relationships that you establish, it's given me the opportunity to become like, not just to know some of the older generations of activists, but actually have someone like the most important, consequential, lovely queer activists from the generation above and the generation above again, and the generation below. And to be able to have that full range of relationships with people who's changed the world so that my life can be better, and the people who you can then also then put your arm around and try and be supportive of them. And that's, yeah, that's just been a joy.
I agree. Almost like to the point where I kind of go, oh, I'm talking to this person. You're the person who invented that thing, or you're the person who laid down in the road and stopped that thing from happening. And I just go, oh, those are the people. And then I think, well, what's our responsibility? And well, I say our, you've already done enough. Like if you stop now, you've done more than that, but you won't. And I'm glad for that. I kind of sometimes feel like, what's my role then as one of the emerging elders of the community? I'm not just going to sit back and say, oh, thanks for doing all that. You made it so much better for me. It's like, no, I can't stop. So
So what
that idea of
does that
just
make?
getting
What,
started,
what does that make your responsibility then? What does that feel like to you?
privilege.
But what does it mean, like in real terms? Like how does that? How does that translate into behaviours? And
I think it translates like having conversations like this instead of sitting on the sofa watching TV, or showing up to all those places where we see each other rather than thinking, oh, I'll just stay in tonight, or putting something out into the world, whether it's through LinkedIn or social media or a book that somehow speaks to someone. It's all of those things, and all of those things that I don't yet know. Like I know that something else is going to happen. I know that something else will emerge from all of this, and I don't know what that is yet, and I'm really excited about that because it's,
your book's going to be a game changer for that as well.
fingers crossed. I really, I'm so proud of all of the stories that I was able to capture from people and put into it. Like I feel really proud of the work of it, and yeah, I hope it does something for someone.
I shall be first in line for the queue on the day it gets published.
The queue, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? I'd love it if there was a queue. We
Well,
should
shall we
start a
do it?
queue.
Shall we go and queue together? We can queue together, and then we'll be a queue.
Stand outside like foils or something.
I might take a tent the night before.
And I mean, I'm not sleeping out the night before. I'm too old for that. But we could just leave the tent there.
Stay, like, get a nice boutique hotel. So
Yeah, exactly. And be like, I'll be back in the morning.
fab. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Real pleasure. Real pleasure. What a joy talking to you, Paul.
I'm very glad that we had this time. I look forward to even more.